It's been 84 years.
Stellaris Patch 4.0.22 has released. Today we're going to be going through the extensive patch notes for this latest release in the 4.0 patch cycle. Yes, we're now up to number 22, ladies and gentlemen, since Biogenesis released back at the beginning of May. We're also going to be looking at a statement from the game director about the state of 4.0 and their plans for the future. On top of that, we are looking at some of the proposed changes that will be coming with the next patch, 4.1. We're going to get the name of that patch and dive into a few more details. That patch will be coming out alongside the next DLC. But before we dive into that, I want to briefly talk about Europa Universalis 5. Paradox have recently announced that the game will be releasing on November the 4th. This is the latest installment in the Europa Universalis franchise. And if you'd like to pre-purchase it and also support this channel, you can do so by using the link down in the description below. Or head over to the Paradox store and use the code MONTUPLAYS at the checkout. Before we dive into the patch notes, and ladies and gentlemen, make sure you're prepared for those patch notes. It's massive, that's why this video is so goddamnably long. We're going to look first at some words from the game director and then talk about the 4.1 update, which is going to come out alongside the next DLC for the game. So let's dive in and find out a little more about all of this. The 4.0 Phoenix update was an extremely ambitious undertaking. This is the words of the game director here, ladies and gentlemen. Intending to lay the foundation for the future of Stellaris. Large foundational updates are very disruptive, and the game director drastically underestimated the amount of time it would take to get things back into proper shape following this one. These systematic reworks, however, will allow the developers to expand and improve the game for years to come. This is only the beginning. So what Count Dooku is basically saying here is that Stellaris needed this massive rework because it's going to utilize the new systems going forwards, and the implication is we're not going to be getting as many massive overhauls, massive reworks in the future. I'm kind of reading this in two separate ways. Way number one, good. We're not going to get massive systemic reworks anymore for at least a while, maybe a couple of years. Two, if we get to that far off point where we start needing systemic reworks again, it might actually not be something that we're going to do. As you probably heard earlier in the video, EU5, Europa Universalis 5 is coming out soon. That basically means they've released Crusader Kings 3, Europa Universalis 5, City Skylines 2. Their only large titles left that haven't been updated in the last few years, then that is Stellaris and Hearts of Iron. So whether we get Hearts of Iron 5 first or Stellaris 2 first, I don't know. I suspect we will get both of them eventually, or, I don't know, Paradox goes bankrupt and closes its doors. I think that's kind of one or the other happens in that regard. Let's continue with the note from the head honcho. Stellaris has several parallel development tracks. The custodians on the core team remain primarily focused on improving and optimizing the base game experience. This structure proved especially valuable during this release cycle, as their partners at Abracan, which is an external studio responsible for Astral Planes and Grand Archive. Well anyway, Abracan were able to step in and assist with the Planet UI, something we're going to look at in just a minute. They are continuing to refine systems from 4.0, and that remains at the top of the priority list for the developers. They have the goal of meeting the players' expectations. As they said back in Dev Diary 361, fundamentally, as the players, Stellaris is your game. Our feedback has helped make Stellaris the leading sci-fi 4X grand strategy game, and it's what will carry the developers into the next era of development. The Wilderness Open Beta was a success thanks to everyone who took part, giving the developers the chance to experiment while maintaining a quick release cadence over the summer. The 4.0.22 release was vastly improved because of the players' contributions. Internally, the game director is currently experimenting with some major changes to ships with a focus on improving performance, which, if they look promising in the internal tests, he plans on bringing to us as the next open beta later on during the 4.1 cycle. Like the technology and combat open betas, this will allow the devs to try changes without disrupting the main branches and may be entirely discarded or revamped if they don't like how it's turning out or if they cause other issues. The game director Eladrin will keep all of us updated on the state of the experiments and share more details in a future dev diary. And, like the wilderness changes, that's the 4.0.22 changes, our reactions will help determine whether or not the developers keep them in. I'm suspicious about these major changes coming to ships. Basically, as far as I'm aware, ships are now one of the largest causes of late game lag. There are so many more ships in the game than were in the game at release. Intentionally, things are not the same as they used to be. Economies are bigger, so more ships can be upkept and maintained, which means there are much larger fleets. And because we have much larger fleets, that is requiring quite a bit of additional computation. So, to give my 2 cents on this message from the game director briefly, I think that it is probably unreasonable of the player base to level the claim or the accusation or idea that 4.0 was released too early because of the developers. It's fairly likely that given the way that the expansion pass system works, that they had to release the DLC with a certain cadence, otherwise they'd need to offer refunds for the expansion pass to everybody for biogenesis, and I suspect higher up decisions were made that that would not be possible, that they did not want to issue refunds, they did not want to push back that release date. I think it would be fair to level the blame at Stellaris 4.0, which clearly needed longer to bake in the oven. Even with these changes, it still is going to require the 4.1 update and some of the UI changes we're going to see in a minute to reach the same kind of polish, the same kind of level as Stellaris had before 4.0, but the blame should probably rest with whoever it was that had the authority and took the decision to release on time and not push that release date back. It's really in a lot of ways upset and hurt the player base. I know a lot of people that have stopped playing Stellaris because of 4.0 and who keep asking, is Stellaris even playable anymore? I'm hopeful we're going to get back to a place where I can answer firmly, honestly and reasonably, yes, Stellaris is as good as it was back in 3.14, if not better. Let's dive in now and look at the changes coming in 4.1 with the Lyra update and briefly talk about the next DLC. The next major Stellaris update will be the 4.1 Lyra update. Lyra represents the lyre of Orpheus, who in Greek mythology enchanted both enemies and beasts with his melodies. He then descended into the underworld to rescue his late wife Eurydice. Hades himself was so moved by the song of Orpheus that he let him take Eurydice with him on the condition that she walk behind him and that he never look back while he was still in the underworld. Spoiler alert, his tale ended tragically because just a few short steps from the surface his faith faltered and he looked back, losing Eurydice forever. Making questionable pacts with potentially malevolent entities felt especially fitting for a release paired with Shadows of the Shroud, which is the next Stellaris DLC. This completes the developer's arc of ascension by exploring the Shroud and Psionic Ascensions. It's still too early to go into too many details, and they're going to be introducing Shadows of the Shroud thoroughly next week. At this time, they do not yet have a date to announce the 4.1 release. I am very happy about this. By not giving us a date, this means they're not going to be forced to release at a certain time regardless of whether or not the game is ready. But the game director still wants to start talking about what's going to be in the 4.1 release anyway, because certain things are already locked in. There have been a number of requests to reorganize some of the information and buttons on the Planet View UI, and the devs have tried to improve the general flow of some common actions. Because let's be honest, the Planet Management UI at the moment is pretty annoying and bad. It doesn't give us a lot of the information we want, and it doesn't help us to understand where other information may be. The new planet UI is wider than the current one, making better use of the space available for most Stellaris players while still remaining usable on the lowest resolutions. On the Surface tab, this extra space is filled with the planet summary that was previously on the Management tab. It's now back to being on the Surface tab, thank God. And the build queue is now once again permanently visible. Constructing a building will advance to the next open building slot and will no longer close the building list. Decisions and terraforming have also moved to this tab. You can see that at the moment on the GIF on screen. It's kind of low resolution, but it does show you what the Surface tab now looks like and how the Construct Buildings window is mobile. Very, very interesting. Next, we move on to the Management tab, which now contains a better breakdown of pop groups with a collapsible list that is first grouped by species, then by stratum, then by individual pop groups. This is an amazing quality of life improvement that actually means we can understand what the fudge is going on with our pop groups. Oh my god, we've needed this. I want it today. I want it today. They've added a monthly pop summary as well that includes the growth, migration, and assembly that occurred the previous month, and they brought back the pie charts. Ladies and gentlemen, the pie charts have returned. Cometh the time, cometh the pie. Pie charts throughout the planet view will also highlight their segments when you hover over different elements. Ooh, that's pretty cool. That's very cool. In fact, I'm very much in favor of this. Great. Everything here looks good. I'm glad they've changed it up a bit. The biggest changes on the Economy tab are better use of space, the addition of the summary in the top right, and vastly improved tooltips. So that summary in the top right is a pie chart that shows us how many elite, specialist workers, and civilians we have. Awesome. Keeping your mouse over a job will now show the full production information rather than just the partial information. In the current UI, which we're going to be playing with now, and in 4.0.22, many tooltips only showed pop-based upkeep and production rather than combining their inherent values and their job-based values. Yes, good. Finally, we can actually see what the devil is happening. This is shown in what we've been seeing on the screen. Wow. This is great. This is much more useful. This is a better UI that will give us the information we actually want, whereas at the moment it kind of obscures it, and in a lot of ways you actually don't know what is happening, especially as a newer player. I can't wait to get my hands on this with 4.1. Job tooltips now show complete production and upkeep information for both the job and for the pop involved. The armies and holding tabs remain mostly unchanged, but with the extra space available, recruitment no longer needs to be a pop-out tab to list the armies available. I wish we were also able to, on a planet, recruit 5 or 10 armies at a time. I wouldn't even mind having an army builder like the Fleet Management tab, so we could create armies in space somewhere that is, an army management tab. Why not? Why not give us that? Please go on, give us a go. There are a number of other changes coming to 4.1, such as the addition of an organic trait to make food-consuming pops more explicit and allows the devs to simplify a ridiculous number of triggered upkeep checks. This and continued bug fixing and working on stability and performance is what they're going to be doing moving forward. Here you can see the organic trait, which is like, I guess, having the machine trait, giving you +1 food upkeep per 100 pops. Excellent. Carbon-based life forms require a steady diet of nutrients to preserve their biological functions. Who would have guessed it? Overall, I wish we got these changes coming right now in 4.0.22, but it's still good. We are going to finally have a usable and helpful planetary UI. Bear in mind, none of what we've just covered is coming in 4.0.22. We're now going to dive into the patch notes for the latest patch, and it's honestly a massive set of notes. Make sure that you are prepared, ladies and gentlemen. So what are the improvements? Okay, there's apparently a significant quality of life and system changes that have come for the Wilderness Empires. This is a big positive. It makes Wilderness much more playable. Let's dive into what these are. So to prevent issues with biomass not being available on planets due to construction, all Wilderness jobs are now automatically worked without requiring biomass. These jobs are worked by your primary species. Jobs for Wilderness are now also properly represented instead of being worked by a single pop with a massive workforce bonus. You can now see exactly how the job is worked. And the sliders are also now usable to customize how much of each job will get worked. These changes are intended to prevent situations where some jobs would go unworked, and overall this should make Wilderness less bug prone. These changes are intended to give you, the players, more control over your economy in deficit situations as well. Wilderness economically was a real mess before this patch. This patch is a lot better. If you've played it already, if you've been trying the beta out, this patch kind of brought Wilderness up to par, not exactly, but at least close to other empires, and did remove quite a few of the bugs that everyone has been experiencing. So let's thank the devs for fixing this new origin that came with patch 4.0.1 with patch 4.0.22. That's about 21 patches later. Grown pops now spawn in a default stratum and job like civilian or maintenance drone if you're a machine or hive empire, instead of being of their unemployed parent stratum. This should mean you're no longer going to see every planet constantly having some minor level of unemployment. This was honestly, from a UI perspective, a complete nightmare. It meant that the unemployment icon was totally useless, because what was previously happening was pops would grow in, let's say, the specialist tier, the specialist stratum, and then they would become unemployed specialist pops and slowly wait to demote. But this would be a tiny number of pops overall, usually, and thus it wasn't really true employment, it was just this pop growth weird modifier thing. Planetary automation also no longer actively tries to keep some civilians around. Civilians are useful, you can do massive strategies with civilians, but if you're not focusing on them, having them hanging around is kind of a bit economically inviable. You do want to have them working proper jobs unless you're going for a civilian strategy with all of your modifiers and various bonuses. They've improved the planet modifier tooltips so they display a better source than from buildings. The Technology Ascendancy Ascension perk now unlocks research policies, allowing you to increase the draw weight for different technology categories. This is actually massive. This, I believe, puts tech ascendancy from where I had it previously, which was relatively low, up to at least the A tier if you're trying to tech rush down certain routes. For example, if you're trying to unlock synthetic technologies to synthetically ascend as quickly as possible, this would be very useful. Or if we want to go for mega engineering, again, very useful to push down a certain category. I'm also thinking of getting the tier 2 building tech so we can get our Ecumenopolis up a little bit faster. This could be very, very useful when combined with things like +1 research alternatives to really make sure we can get rid of some of that RNG and get the techs we need faster. They've added research restriction policies, allowing you to massively reduce the chance of drawing dangerous technologies. For example, if you want to use automated research without researching these technologies. Let's dive in to some little addendums here. They've added the refactored restrictions to the ethical guideline refactoring Galcom resolution, which increases the draw chance for dangerous and rare technologies. They've added demands to the technologist faction pertaining to the research restriction policies, probably that you don't have any restrictions on them and that your technology choices can be unlimited, even if it's very, very dangerous. Also, being humiliated by the materialist Fallen Empire while undertaking cosmogenesis will lock you into the restrictions imposed policy for 10 years, significantly decreasing the chance of drawing cosmogenesis related technologies. Let's unpack that last bit for a moment before we dive back into the restricted research policies. Most of the cosmogenesis technologies that we need to level up are unlocked as tech research choices. And they are kind of permanently unlocked if I recall a lot of the time. So actually having this policy being imposed on you shouldn't be that big a deal. Yes, it's going to prevent you getting some of the Fallen Empire buildings probably, but a lot of those important techs like the ships and some of the techs for leveling up, I'm pretty sure they all get unlocked when you get to the next level. Then when it comes to these research restriction policies, I think this is quite an interesting and definitely thematic and RP thing to add into the game. That's definitely very, very fun. It's also helpful for those players that use automated research, of course. Though actually, I think this could go a step further and kind of be somewhat inverted to the tech ascendancy AP and allow you to restrict researching things like psionic research. For example, if you're a very materialist empire and you've decided that psionics is nonsense and you're not going to pay anyone to try and do research into pseudoscience, you might want to restrict funding to psionics. The same as well, of course, with spiritualists wanting to restrict all of the machine-related techs. Yes, if you have machines set to outlawed, not allowed, you can't research those technologies anyway. But what if you're a spiritualist empire that has some basic machines, let's say they are just robots, you've not gone for droids or synthetics, and you want to outlaw getting any more research without demolishing the robots you already have? You're very happy with some basic, toaster level robots that don't really do much except toast your bread or move a box from A to B. You just don't want to go up to a droid that can replace all of your scientists. I think this would allow a little bit more granularity, and you could go beyond this, in fact, and have, different options that you could choose to not go for with research. Let's say, for example, you want to restrict researching technologies in fields or something else, or missiles or whatever. You could have it as a military one. Let's say you don't want to do much shield research, you want to focus on armor. I think there could be some draw weight things that could be applied here to just add a little bit more granularity in a fun way. But I do love the direction that this is going in. Updated modifiers that affect the cost or upkeep of both buildings and districts to instead affect planetary infrastructure cost or upkeep, which of course includes buildings, districts, and district specialization. So that will then cover everything. Honestly, I think that's more of a bug fix than an improvement maybe, but hey ho. And if you're enjoying this video, please increase the infrastructure cost of that like button. Now we're going to dive into balance changes, and oh boy, this is going to be quite a large category. I expect to be in this for at least 15 to 20 minutes, folks. There's a lot to cover and a lot to talk about. Let's go. First up, arc furnaces no longer decrease in mineral output as they increase in alloy output. The stages are now 1 mineral, 2 mineral, 2 mineral and an alloy, and 2 mineral and 2 alloys. Honestly, I think this is good, with probably getting a fair middle ground between the old system where they were really, really overpowered and the more recent system where they were kind of nerfed a bit. The broadside stingers have been updated to correctly follow the 24, 36, 48 small slot equivalency for their weapon slots. The youngest stage now has more medium slots but fewer large slots, while the adult and elder stages only have large slots. This is something of a buff, I think, for the adult and elder stages, but honestly, if you're running with broadsides rather than the stingers that have X slots, I feel like you're probably doing it wrong. The Cypher Mauler has given up 2 of its small weapon slots in exchange for 2-point defense slots. This is a Cosmogenesis only biological ship type. Having the 2 small slots replaced with PD is probably negative if you're putting on those small slots something like a disruptor that could hit through if you're going in close, because it is a Mauler, let's not forget, it is going to go close to the enemy. But overall, I don't think this is going to be too much of a change. 20% of the habitability ceiling reductions from Shattered Ring blockers had been moved to the more easily cleared Ancient Rubble blockers. This makes Shattered Ring even better, so that's good, I suppose. It's not massively a big bonus if you're a biological Shattered Ring. I mean, let me rephrase that. It's definitely a big bonus as a bio Shattered Ring. You can get your growth started a little bit earlier. But of course, you're still limited by your Shattered Ring habitability, which is pretty tough. If you're a machine, you just need that one level 1 tech and you can go and change your habitability for other planets anyway, so it's a nice change. It buffs Shattered Ring a bit, but I don't really think it's too substantial in terms of a balanced move. Shattered Ring Origin now starts with 2 additional scrap mining districts. This means a few more minerals and alloys right from the get-go, allowing you to clear blockers just that little bit more easily if the blockers require minerals. Various Guardian space critter factions will now ignore FTL inhibitors. Guardians are of course another word for Leviathans. Those are the giant space creatures like dragons and the like that fly around and hurt us. A bunch of them, I believe, already ignored FTL inhibitors. This now means even more are going to do so, so defense in depth is going to be very useless if an angry space guardian comes a-calling for your hide. The diplomacy tradition has suffered quite a bit since the most recent release of Stellaris 4.0 because they've moved the Federation into a technology. Now they've given it a little bit of a buff. The tradition, the Federation, will also give you 25% progress in the Federation code technology, which grants you an automatic ability if you take that tradition to research and unlock Federation technologies. This does make a lot of sense. It would be so stupid, and this is partly why the Federation tradition sucked, if you took it and were unable to actually use most of the bonuses because you didn't have the Federation code technology and thus were not in a Federation. This is a move in the right direction. I actually think it would be even better if it just full up unlocked the technology for you, because why not? The Federation tradition pretty much sucks. Just give us the full technology, like just as a free unlock. Don't make us have to research even more. The Holo Museums acquired from the Curator Enclave now swap entertainers, or evaluators if you're that way inclined, to curators or curator drones if you don't like individualism. These jobs produce unity and amenities, with each Holo Museum adding additional job upkeep and output. Holo Museums can now be constructed in research and resort specializations. I believe they already could in resort specializations, at least some of them, but now they definitely can, apparently. Finally, these buildings are improved by the Archeo Engineers AP. Overall, this isn't a massive buff, but it's, I think, a nice thematic change to use as well some of the newer systems which combine different buildings to create a single role, in this case curators, with a bunch of bonuses. That's a big part of what the 4.0 economic rework was all about, so it's great to see it included. The Galactic Curator Civic will also swap entertainers or evaluators for curators. The devs have massively improved the abilities of your commanders. How have they done that? Well, they've substantially increased the base command limit of fleets and most sources of command limits. The little byline here reading, "We know you're going to doomstack those fleets anyway." That's true. Often, you're going to put most of your fleets in one big block to smash through whatever it is you need to smash through. So let's allow our leaders to have more of an effect, more of an impact by spreading their bonus across more ships. Overall, this basically makes the game easier to manage. You're going to have fewer fleets in the mid and late game, and your high-level leaders will be able to command more ships, and thus you'll get better bang for your buck with them. The charismatic and repugnant traits, which at the moment are pretty much useless because you can get easily enough amenities through pretty much any other source like buildings or civilians or basically anything, and repugnant's really good because you don't care about that minus 20% amenities efficiency from entertainers. Well, their robotic, cybernetic and overtuned equivalents now additionally provide efficiency modifiers for elite strata and biotrophy jobs. This is going to be something of a negative impact, though it's not going to touch obviously something like worker cooperative, but having repugnant reduce your elite strata output, that's not just amenities, that's also going to be unity, and hurting biotrophies, pretty much the only way of getting unity as a rogue servitor, amongst some others I suppose, is nasty. I don't think this is enough to stop charismatic being crap and repugnant being really OP in the current patch. So probably keep going, though it's going to hurt you a little bit more than normal. They've decreased the amenities granted by housing buildings. This is an absolute travesty, though I think from a balance perspective it's needed at the moment, or before this patch. It was better to build a luxury housing. You get more amenities from it at the cost of 0 worked jobs. We must add that. There was 100% or an infinite pop efficiency here. Compare that to the entertainment building, which would give you 200 entertainer jobs. You'd have to get pops to work them, and then you get fewer amenities and no housing when compared to the luxury housing building. So this is probably good, because at the moment housing buildings are massively overpowered, though it maybe needs to be tuned even more. Take away the number of amenities we're getting from luxury housing, or just actually remove the buildings altogether, honestly, because they're kind of superfluous. Either we need entertainers and we need amenity producing jobs, or if we can just use buildings like this and civilians, thus we don't need those jobs, and we're entirely excluding a piece of the design philosophy of the game, and also making civics like warrior culture worse because you don't really want to run entertainers, you see? I actually think, and I would be in favor of just deleting all the housing buildings. Maybe for hives we keep them in and tune them down a little, because with hives you only really have maintenance drones. But yeah, get rid of them. They're just an efficiency kind of drag. They're required often to make your empire more efficient, especially if you're trying a power game. But they prevent you, as I said, from kind of interacting with other core elements of gameplay. Reactor boosters now give a percentage boost to reactor output. No one was asking for this, but I think it's good. Yeah, I mean, I don't really recommend you use reactor boosters in general. It's better to get a better kind of engine, or not engine, better power generation like fusion power or antimatter power, go up a level there, than spend extra alloys on a booster, or swap out some shields for armor. Armor is generally better anyway, but yeah, this is a change. It exists. Later growth stages of biological ships now have an inherent reactor output percentage boost as well, meaning you're not struggling as much. This is a big buff for bioships, actually. Bioships do sometimes struggle in the late stages and require either reactor boosters or basically no shielding whatsoever. This is quite helpful. Okay, now we're getting into a really juicy change. They have rebalanced the trade policies for regular empires. Let's go through all of them, and then let's rank how good they are, right? Wealth creation is now going to go 50% trade, 50% energy. So let's explain in detail how this exactly works. You pick a trade policy. Then when you generate trade in your empire, it's a normal resource. We now generate it from pops across the board from their living standards, as well as certain jobs like trader jobs, for example, or civilians. They generate quite a bit of trade. That's collected up in the same way energy or minerals are, and then once we've collected those resources up, we store them in our bank, basically. What the trade policy does is we take half of that income, in this case of wealth creation, and instead of it making trade, it goes and is converted directly into energy income. So wealth creation means we're getting 50% trade, 50% energy from that income. Consumer benefits. 50% trade, 25% consumer goods, and there is a 25% conversion tax. Now, given the fact that a consumer good on the market costs twice as much as an energy or an energy credit, having that 25% conversion tax writing off 25% of your trade value doesn't actually seem like a negative overall. What you're really doing here is you're converting the energy you would get directly into consumer goods without needing to pay any market fees. Let's not forget, you're paying a base of 30% market fees if you're going to buy those consumer goods. So this is actually quite good overall, right? This has not been changed. I just wanted to highlight exactly how it kind of works there. Marketplace of ideas, 50% trade converted to 25% unity, and then you're writing off 25% the remaining quarter in that conversion tax. You have no other way of buying unity with trade, so Marketplace of Ideas is very, 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 very useful. Now let's move on to Trade League, and Trade League has gotten, I think in some ways better, a lot of ways I think it's gotten better, yeah. So Trade League is now 50% trade, so half goes to trade, that's pretty normal from what we've seen. 15% energy, 15% consumer goods, 15% unity, and a 5% conversion tax. So you're losing 40% of your consumer goods or unity as opposed to being consumer benefits or marketplace of ideas, but gaining an equivalent amount, not to the loss, but to what you're actually getting an income of the opposite resource. So this is a much more efficient use of trade. You're also now going to get energy. We weren't getting energy before, we're getting energy now. I can't remember the exact numbers to do a comparison, but I'm pretty sure we were already on 15% consumer good and 15% unity. It could have been 25-25, honestly, but I think that was a long time ago and I'm misremembering. I think this is basically a straight up buff because instead of having a 20% conversion tax, we're now having 75% of that conversion tax converted straight into energy. Great. Holy Covenant. That is 50% trade as usual, 37.5% unity, 12.5% conversion tax. So that is basically a 50% boost to our unity output as opposed to Marketplace of Ideas when we compare that over. So there's much less conversion there. You're getting over double, 2.5 times in fact, what you would be getting through the Trade League. So if you want unity, Holy Covenant is going to make the most unity, but it is much less efficient. You're losing 12.5% conversion in terms of what your trade output is. Finally, we have the real joker of the pack here, mutual aid. Mutual aid only gets 25% of the trade you produce returned as trade value, as trade that is stored in your bank that you can use to buy and sell other resources. That's half as much as all of the other policies. However, we are going to get 20% energy, 20% minerals, 20% food. Wow. And 15% unity. So there is absolutely no conversion tax whatsoever if you pick mutual aid. On top of that, some of the main things you use trade for, especially in the early and mid game, is purchasing energy, minerals, and food. In the mid and late game, you're often using it to buy energy and consumer goods, or energy and alloys, depending on exactly how your economy is functioning and whether or not you're producing enough energy for all of your lovely ships. Overall, I'm fairly confident this is a buff to mutual aid. Mutual aid has gone from getting 30% trade returned down to 25%, and therefore just more resources, unless the resource numbers were staying the same and somehow it was earning 105% back. That would be nutso. Also, it's getting the same amount of unity as the Trade League here, and just fantastic kind of resource outputs for basic resources. It should mean if you focus on trade, you could have trade value, produce all of your basics, and then after that only need alloys, consumer goods, and research to be produced with specialists. You can make a very specialized economy with mutual aid. Let's start ranking them. Right, so mutual aid is clearly the #1 best trade policy in the game. In terms of efficiency, it's #1. If you really need consumer goods, it's a little bit problematic because you don't have very much trade. There are, of course, trade upkeeps required in the game. Let's not forget, if you're not producing resources locally, and if you're going to be producing a lot of your energy, minerals, and food through trade policy, that means you're going to get planetary deficits, which comes with a trade value upkeep. So having very low trade income from mutual aid means you can't buy things like consumer goods as easily without, converting some of this back into trade by selling the energy, minerals, or food if you're making excess. So yes, it does have some fine-tuning required to play with it properly, but overall, most efficient. You're getting unity equal to the Trade League. It's really good. Following that, if you really need unity, Holy Covenant is going to be amazing, but honestly, I don't think it's that necessary. I would say #2 is going to be Trade League. It's the most efficient. You're going to get that 5% conversion tax. Then if you need unity, it's Holy Covenant after Trade League. So mutual aid #1, Trade League #2, Holy Covenant #3, then probably consumer benefits, followed by Marketplace of Ideas, and finally wealth creation. However, once you've completed your tradition trees, of course, Marketplace of Ideas and Holy Covenant become completely bloody useless. You can probably run almost all of your edicts without needing these because you're going to have factions producing probably enough unity in the late game after you've completed your traditions to run all of the edicts you want to run. And okay, maybe you want to do some planetary ascension. Holy Covenant, if you're pushing the planetary ascension path, fine, still useful, but honestly not that useful. Wealth creation in the late game, I would say, is probably one of the best. When you've got massive fleets, let's say you've got 2, 3, 4,000 naval capacity worth of fleets, you're probably struggling unless you've really kept up and focused on it with your energy income. I often find I am, if I don't have a Dyson sphere running, and even if I do, I then just build more fleets and I'm again struggling with energy income. Switching back to wealth creation right near the end of the game is very useful. So early game, mutual aid #1, followed by Trade League #2. Late game, wealth creation, I think, can throw a spanner in the works and end up being #1 once you've got all of the unity you really need. Strategic resource and planetary special feature balancing. So there's a lot that's here we need to go through. So let's take a look. Assorted planetary features that gave rare crystals or exotic gases from technicians now apply to miners or farmers respectively. So they now apply to the right things, I believe. They've added new district specialization for strategic resources and some special features. Rare crystal extraction district specialization to mining, volatile motes harvesting to generator, exotic gas capture to agriculture, and then the central spire district specialization for urban districts on certain relic worlds, where of course you have those rare resource deposits. The industrial sector planetary feature on relic worlds now gives +6 farming district capacity, which I think is pretty fun. Trantor, for example, in the Foundation novelizations they stripped back some of the old city, and they made soil or found soil and started doing farming on Trantor when it was finally a relic world. So having this in Stellaris, I think it's great. It's thematic. I love it. The Betharian processing district specialization now gives additional miner jobs to the mining district as well. Good. They've reduced the strategic resources production of industrial jobs from refineries, chemical plants, and crystal plants. At the moment, the amount of rare resources you get from strategic resource production is just insane. Once you've got one planet up and running properly to produce either alloys or consumer goods, you generally have +100, +200 rare resources each category, and you never have to worry about rare resources again. It was really badly balanced. I hope it's been tuned. I'm concerned that in the early game it's going to be really hard to get enough rare resources to actually do anything with them if it's been tuned to still be linear. I'd like to see, and this is quite honest, I'd like to see some basic rare resource production from these buildings with a further very small modifier for every 100 industrial jobs. So for example, build a gas plant refinery, it should produce say 4 exotic gases base, then plus 0.1 exotic gases for every 100 industrial jobs. So that means, let's say there's 5,000 of the things, you'll get an additional +5 for a total of +10. Maybe 0.1's a bit wrong, maybe it should be 0.2, so you're getting 15 or something, but that should be kind of the order of magnitude we're playing with here. You generally need on a late game planet somewhere in the region of 20 or 30 of each rare resource type to get all of your special buildings running, but it's not that many, and it is usually only one specific type per planet, because the research buildings take exotic gases, for example, the consumer goods buildings take crystals, etc. Let's see how they've rebalanced it. I think it might need further work, but this is a step in the right direction. They've also hit the ancient refinery with the same nerf stick, so that's now much worse as well. Hopefully not so bad that it's useless using, but still doesn't produce as much. They've increased the minor artifact cost of the ancient refinery. Whoop-de-doo. They've increased the strategic resource cost and upkeep for several research buildings. I hope this isn't an increase, because if they've massively nerfed your production of, let's say, volatile motes, but they've increased the upkeep of volatile motes for your researchers if you've got the research building upgraded to the top level, because those higher level physics, engineering, and society buildings give you now more income for society, engineering, or physics respectively, but also a rare resource upkeep for every single physicist, sociologist, or engineer working those jobs. If that wasn't all, there's further adjustments on strategic resource balancing. Refinery buildings now add plus 0.25 strategic resource income to industrial jobs at the cost of 1.25 minerals or 2 food. That could still be too much, not sure. Mode harvesters, gas extractors, and crystal mines now give plus 0.5 strategic resource income to rural jobs instead of plus 1. They've basically gone, you can get 25% from refineries and 50% from the harvesters, extractors, and mines. That's not great, but not terrible. The nanite transmuter and dimensional replicator have had their outputs and upkeep roughly double. This is good. The nanite transmuter and dimensional replicator were basically useless in the face of the overwhelming incomes you would be getting from those refineries. So, step in the right direction. Still think it needs a little bit more work. Logistic drones now give a base output of 6 trade and 500 amenities per 100 jobs. It used to be 4 trade and 250 amenities, however they now have an upkeep of 2 energy for machine empires or 2 minerals for hive mind empires. This is 50% more trade, and 100% more amenities, which is fantastic. Logistic drones were kind of a joke. They're now a lot better. They're closer to actual traders. I'd like to see machines and hives getting access to a mercantile civic that should be called something like, logistics, and it has all of the same benefits as mercantile, but it applies to these logistics drones, and it improves your empire. I mean, I don't see why not, Why not give hives access to mercantile? You've given them trade value, for God's sake. Just give them access to mercantile, let them go the whole hog. Hold on, wait a minute. No, that's not an idea I've had. That's actually something they've done. I'm going to take back everything I've just said, because the devs already did that, and I thought I had an idea there, and no. In my notes, I've had to go back through. That's actually a feature we already have. So my idea was a feature we already have that I decided to repackage as my own idea. I'm really sorry, ladies and gentlemen. They've already done that, thank goodness. It's actually called logistics as well. Oh my goodness me, I'm such an idiot. It's actually in some ways kind of better. However, what it doesn't do is it doesn't give them access to the economic policies, which I think kind of sucks. Give them access to the economic policies. It also doesn't give you more trade from jobs in quite the same way. So they have a logistics tradition, but I think it should basically just be a one-to-one of the mercantile tradition, not be something very different, because logistics, looking through it, let's put it up on the screen now. So comparing these across, you're going to get some buffs to maintenance drone, just +1 trade. You're not getting the +1 amenities to civilians that trickle up economics get, so that's worse. You're getting 5% job efficiency for logistic drones. I would argue the -20% trader upkeep could be better in the early game, but later on the job efficiency is probably better. -10% ships logistic upkeep is really neither here nor there. That's a tiny trade change most of the time, and if your ships are docked at home and you're not at war, that does absolutely nothing. I'd rather get the +10% trade from jobs, honestly. On top of that, we're not getting access to the trade policies. Why the hell not? Let's get access to them. Come on. I don't see why we need to hold back hive-minded empires like this. We're also not getting additional amenities from logistic drones. We're only getting more trade. No amenity bonuses here at all. I really think that they should be getting more than what Mercantile is giving. Mercantile isn't amazing. It's not S tier as it stands anyway. And logistics is just straight up a bit worse for pretty much no good reason than hive bad, hive bad, hive bad. I think it should really be borrowing more from Mercantile there. Diving back to the patch notes, they have also increased the job weight for logistic drones as well. So now if a planet is low on amenities, you're going to more likely get more logistic drones working. Even though they don't have any bonuses really to their amenities, they only produce, 500 amenities per 100 jobs? That's all right, I suppose. They've also rebalanced the deployment outpost or deployment post, the capital building for newly colonized planets if you're a machine intelligence, to produce more base amenities. This is very necessary and essential, and it's something they probably should have done quite a while ago, because when you first get on the planet, you'll often find there's a massive amenities issue quite quickly. Not necessarily straight away, but quite quickly. Relic World Dense Ruins now give a -25% district capacity instead of -6 district capacity, and they've added some more polish for the resort world. I assume that's polish and not Polish, because there's no capital P. Nanotech research facilities now have a planet cap of 6, so you can't have more than 6 per planet. The nanotech researcher job also has some innate nanite upkeep. Nanotech research facilities also now only affect engineering jobs. Overall, this is just a big nerf to nanotech. Nanite Ascension isn't the most powerful. I don't really think it was necessary to nerf them like this, but yeah. Unless the planet cap of those research facilities was lower, but I don't think that it was. The situation progress awarded for evolutionary predatory empires when they discover alien genetic material in events now increase the situation progress by 5%, 10%, and 20% rather than just static values. This makes it much less useful early on, but much more useful later on in the game. Ironically, Mostly you only make first contact with aliens early in the game, so overall, I think this is going to be a nerf. Probably. There have been some slavery updates for non-slaver guild empires. Unemployed slaves intentionally do not demote into civilians. They remain as unemployed pops in the worker stratum. They do not gain additional happiness penalties beyond those they already have due to being enslaved. Let's dive into that briefly. Yes, let's say you've got a slave and they're working in a mine day in, day out, and then you stop them working in the mine. They're still slaves, but they no longer have to do the back-breaking manual labor, they're just not employed. They're probably happy about that, unless they're really Stockholm syndromed. I guess this is a Swedish game, so maybe that's why they've always been less happy when you take the slaves out of their brutal manual labor and make them unemployed and have to do nothing. But yes, now they don't do that. They actually don't hate doing nothing. In fact, I think they should get a happiness boost for being unemployed, but that's just me. Unemployed slaves can also now auto-migrate without requiring a slave processing or transit hub building. That's excellent, as long as they're auto-migrating between your colonies, but that's how auto-migration works, so it's fine, it works. Slaves in domestic servitude will continue to take servant jobs instead of becoming unemployed, but will not auto-migrate. So because they become servants, they're never available to auto-migrate, which I think is good, otherwise you'd never get any servants. I think that maybe there should be a policy or a setting somewhere to set like how many servants are on a planet, and maybe it should be relative to population numbers. So maybe you could have a policy where it goes unlimited servants. So it's like, yeah, any unemployed slave is directly a servant. Then you could have, let's say, a policy where it's for every one pop on the planet, or for every one unenslaved pop, there is a servant slave. For every one unenslaved pop, there's 2 servant slaves, etc. Maybe just have it as a planetary decision as well to enact that, yeah, we're going to resettle some. I don't know. I guess you've always got the resettle button with your domestic servants, so you could always just resettle them yourselves, I suppose. Maybe I'm thinking too much about this. They have increased the thresholds for rising unemployment events. Also, note, unemployment slaves do not contribute to rising unemployment events. They're not upset at not being forced into the mines. Good. They've added coastal hamlets district specialization for empires that are both anglers and agrarian idle. These will give you angler, pearl diver, and trader jobs, 50 of each type, and accept both agriculture and urban buildings. The starting aquaculture district specialization is replaced with this if you have an agrarian idle. I'm thinking that that's 150 jobs when normally we get 200. So that's not excellent, unless this is just the urban building type, in which case it seems to be more. If it's also affected by mercantile, this is very, very good. Subterranean urbanization district specialization now grants 75 miner and trader jobs per district, which is up from 50 of each. That used to be a total of 100, it's now 150. Aquaculture district specialization grants 75 anglers and 75 pearl diver jobs per district. It used to be 100 anglers. I assume it still used to do pearl divers as well. If it didn't, that's a buff. If it did, this is a nerf. Not 100% sure actually on what the numbers were, and I've already changed over my game now, so I can't check anymore, annoyingly. Agrarian Villages District Specialization now grants 75 farmers and 75 trader jobs per district, up from 50 of each in all cases. The developers have harmonized triggers for draw weights for farming technologies. I think that should be normalized, technically. Or they're all similar now. They're all pretty close together and are correct compared to before. I think they're a bit skew-if. They have halved the benefits for mutagenic spas or lubrication basin civics and doubled their penalties. At the moment, lubrication basins was wildly overpowered when combined with modularity. Honestly broken, like really, really crazily strong. The job weight for genomic researchers has gone up too. This basically means if a pop has an option of going to 2 different jobs based on the job weighting, certain numbers of pops will go to certain jobs. So you're going to get more genomic researchers filled up as opposed to other jobs than in the previous patch. Honestly, I'd noticed that often to develop those genomic researchers, I'd actually had to prioritize them, which wasn't my favorite thing to do, but honestly it was kind of okay. Knights of the Toxic God has been rebalanced just a little bit. Knights jobs now receive a 15% base upkeep increase every time they unlock a quest reward that increases their base unity or research output. So they are going to cost more in terms of consumer goods and the like. The impact of night jobs on the speed of the quest situation has been reduced from 0.5 to 0.2. And Squire jobs now also grant a slight increase to the upkeep of night jobs. However, you can still stack an infinite number of Squires. Well, not infinite, but Squires aren't tied directly, as far as I know, to those to a district. You can get lots and lots and lots of them. Scaling the upkeep does mean that the power level here is somewhat contained a bit, but as long as you can produce that extra upkeep, you can still get a massive amount of output, so it should still be very, very powerful. The environmental integration tradition now gives a maximum habitability of 175% for species with the mutagenic habitability trait by default. We can't look at this in isolation though, we have to look at the next two lines as well. So mutation authorities now allow all organic species to reach a maximum habitability of 175%. When we combine that with the environmental integration tradition, this allows all organic species to reach a maximum habitability of 250%. That's 50% more than previously. This is a good bonus. I think that the mutation authorities and mutation tradition overall is still the weakest of the three paths for genetic ascension, but this is a buff and a move in, I suppose, the right direction. Though I guess at this point you're just making them a little bit better at what they already do, and in some cases they do need a bit of an overhaul to reach the same power levels that we're getting with the Purity government authorities. They're crazily strong, or the massive pop growth you can get from cloning. They've halved the effects of species genetic purity for the following jobs: job efficiency for eugenic hierarchy, happiness for phenotypical autonomy, trade for organic syndicate, unity for purity paradigm, leader lifespan and XP gain for biotic dominion and phenotypical autonomy, and council agenda speed for eugenic hierarchy. What I'm not seeing here being reduced is the stability. One of the purity authorities still grants stability, and you can max that out, so that's good, I suppose, though really that wasn't the best. The job efficiency, some of these other ones here, very, very good. Halving the effects of species genetic purity is a massive spanner in the works for the purity authority. This possibly brings it down to be more in line with cloning, though it's still very, very strong. They've increased the trade per 100 pops from the spare organs trait for organ usury to 0.5, making it much, much better. The basic cloaking field generator no longer requires exotic gases, and the advanced cloaking fields technology now requires access to exotic gases. So they've moved things around there just a little bit. So you can get basic cloaking fields without needing exotic resources, rare resources. I think that's good. It does make it a little bit easier to get that rare technology to roll a little bit earlier. That is a mountain of balance changes overall, though. I'm feeling good about the direction we're going in here, though I feel in a lot of cases we're not really addressing the root of some of these problems. We're just trying to balance them until they're playable and interesting without being too broken and overpowered. That is a design choice that is viable. I mean, it's very fine in single player, though with multiplayer it means that in order to play fairly or kind of with a balance, you need to be adding in additional rules still to your multiplayer games to make sure that player power levels are kind of close. As I have always said though, we shouldn't be balancing Stellaris only for the multiplayer community. That would be insanity. Single player is the most played by quite a long shot version of the game, and having overpowered things in single player is fun. We shouldn't get rid of them. I'm happy in a lot of ways, for example, that virtual is still in the game. It is still very strong. They had a bit of an issue when 4.0 was first released, but it's now back to being good and strong again. There is a whole host of bug fixes. I'm just going to talk about a few of them quickly, then you can read the rest if you want to do so by clicking the link in the description and heading over to the dev diary where you can check it out for yourself. The Fallen Empire trade buildings are no longer going to self-destruct, so we can actually build them, thank God. If you change your civics but not your authority, the ruler chip's modifier should no longer reset. That's a fantastic bonus. That's really helpful. That's probably how it should have been all along, and I'm very, very here for that. Neural chips in the synaptic lathe have been fixed and should now function properly. Thank goodness. At the moment, neural chips just weren't working. Also, the GDF fleet, their alloy cost reduction should now be working again. As I said at the start of this bug fix dive, there's a lot more in there if you want to read about it, but those are my favourite fixes that have been bugging the heck out of me in my games. I think you'd have to be living under a rock not to have heard people complaining about the AI in 4.0 being pretty brain dead. The scripting seems to not really have been implemented well enough so that the AI can keep up with the other empires. It's gone back to kind of pre-3.0 in terms of levels of its crapitude. In fact, even Grand Admiral now can be pretty useless in the mid to late game, simply unable to scale or do anything of much function. We do have a whole host of AI changes coming in 4.0.22. May have taken 22 patches to get here, but ladies and gentlemen, we're getting somewhere. Let's dive into these. So, the AI should no longer occasionally just decide to stop building anything and wait for the sweet release of death. This is a massive change, thank God. Oh my goodness me, this is kind of why the AI in the mid to late game seems so crap, is every now and then they just go, nope, I'm done, and they kind of nope out of existence. They've reduced the AI's love of hydroponic farms and other static job resource production buildings and commercial nexes. Thank goodness. The AI is more likely to build engineering, physics, or society research modifying buildings if they have a specialization focusing on that research branch on the planet. Great. AI shattered ring empires will now actually clear out their blockers so they can use the other habitable segments, and they'll also favor techs that are the prerequisites for their shattered ring blockers so that they can actually clear them. They'll also wait a little bit longer and space out their colonization of the other segment so that it's not the main focus of their early game. Now that actually I think is a negative. You want those colonies down as quickly as possible, especially with the update to Shattered Ring where it puts some of the habitability blockers no longer locked behind techs. You can clear them straight away to get up to 20% habitability. The AI now has a better opinion of housing buildings, which are amazing, and will not blow them up as often. Oh yes, that's good. Well, it's good for as long as those housing buildings are useful. When they stop being useful and get balanced out, they'll need to remove this from the AI's logic. So, good, but also later on it could be bad. The AI and automation tech selection in general now more strongly favors tech that unlock district specializations. So this is something of an economic focus that should help them scale their economies on par with the players. They've reduced the stickiness of trade and urban designations on planets. Don't quite know what that means. Maybe the AI was very keen to put those down as designations. But also with the players, when you set it to auto-designate, often you get a planet set to urban or trade designation when there really wasn't much going on in the way of trade on the planet anyway. The AI now has a greater preference for cruisers and battleships. Cruisers are some of the best ships in the game at the moment, and if you're running artillery battleships, they're also amazing. They've adjusted AI priorities regarding research and trade targets, and the AI is no longer quite as gung-ho about defense privatization, thank God. They're always pushing for that, even when it really seems like they shouldn't be. That is one of the galactic community laws that basically focuses on having military companies, private military companies, PMCs. The AI will no longer spam amenity buildings if it doesn't actually need them. And it will no longer mix Unity or Trade District specializations with research or industrial specializations. Good! Thank goodness! Why would it do that? Good. The AI will now reevaluate planet designations once per year, so they can actually change things. That could lead to some weird behavior, but hopefully it's now behaving better. They've relaxed some restrictions regarding the AI building flat job buildings like research labs and foundries, so they should build more of them to get more jobs when I assume they run out of industrial district slots. The AI will now only build research specialization buildings on planets likely to have those types of researchers, but are more likely to do so than before. Oh, this is good again. This basically, the AI is going to play better with its economy, which should prove them to be more of a challenge in the mid and late game. The computer will only build more than 2 strongholds on planets with a fortress district specialization. Good, it shouldn't have more than 2 strongholds on every planet. That was stupid. Why was it doing things like that? Bugs. AI void dwellers will now correctly budget alloys towards building districts. Good. The devs have also fixed a bug where the AI would order their fleets to follow one another, resulting in no fleet movement at all. I hadn't noticed this, but it does now make a lot of sense when some of their fleets simply weren't moving. I didn't know that's because they were following each other and thus stuck. This hopefully means that some fleets will now be more likely to go back home and repair. One of the big issues the AI had at the moment is the AI would not go home and repair after a combat, thus making them easier to fight and kill. AIs now have distinct advanced and endgame economic plans that focus largely on research, naval capacity, and whatever it is they use to build ships. Oh my goodness me, that should be really quite strong if it's a good economic plan. Oh my goodness, wow. If it turns it into a death spiral, problem. But as long as it's still able to function properly and build more, energy buildings if it needs them, then that means the AI should finally get past the hurdle of not having enough nav cap in the late game, thus putting it possibly on par with late game players. If you're, playing Grand Admiral and not super strong and you haven't killed off most of the AI already. The AI is less enthusiastic about building storm-related buildings, because storms don't even matter. They fixed the reanimators and biorepurposing custom debris, and they've reworked how the AI calculates shipyards. If all their shipyards get occupied during a war, they will attempt to build a new one when next building a starbase. That's kind of dangerous and scary, but I am in favor of the AI behaving and being better at the game. Overall, these changes should make Grand Admiral and other AI levels stronger in the mid and late game, which is where we've been seeing most of the fall off actually. There are also a number of UI changes, not as many as we're going to see in the 4.1 patch. We covered that a little bit earlier, some of that. Great goodness, but still quite a few things we should go through. So, the UI will now update deposits when a blocker is cleared while in planet view, while it's open. That's good, you won't have to close it down and reopen it. They've centered the army icons to be in the middle of the background. Habitability and dig sites no longer overlap each other in the planet UI. Pop amount in the current population does not overlap other elements when it has more than 2 digits anymore in the planet UI. Pop count of pop group in the resettlement window does not overlap when it has more than 4 digits. There's a new icon for the strange wormhole because it's different, and that makes it easier to find, which is good. And they've introduced min-max pitch settings for ship model preview. It will no longer do sharp and unpredictable turns when turning the ship model around. I don't really think that was a problem, but good, I'm glad. Pop strata with no possible unemployment like civilians hide the unemployment values in collapsed planet jobs view. I really would hope that they show us how many civilians we have on a planet as well. I'd like to be able to see that. It's something currently you kind of have to go into the management screen to see, and I'm annoyed by that. So I wish it was more visible. They've improved the district tooltips. Hovering over a district now shows the scaled and separated modifiers. Hovering the build button shows the values for a single district. This is what you will gain. So that's kind of more useful, I suppose. Instead of being essentially omnipresent, the orange briefcase in the outline now indicates that you have 500 or more civilians and unemployed pops on the planet. Okay, 100 plus unemployed pops should still override it with the red briefcase. So you'll get an orange briefcase at 500 or more civilians. That's kind of reasonable. I'd like to see a number on the planet window, but getting to know if there's 500 or more civilians on a planet with an orange briefcase, I think that's pretty good and reasonable as well. The devs have added alert settings to the settings menu. They removed the filter by type from message settings. They fixed situation alerts showing the wrong severity based on current stage, and they've abbreviated big faction pop numbers. Good. The big faction pop numbers on your faction screen was just ridiculous at the moment. It should really be like in thousands. Why it was not in thousands and you get really high, I don't know, but here we go. Automation building assets won't leave its frame anymore. Good. That basically means it's not kind of sticking out from where it should be. Purely a cosmetic bug or thing, but good that it's fixed nonetheless. The devs have fixed the description of entries in the situation log occasionally being empty. That was quite infuriating. Building assets are now centered instead of being anchored to the top right corner. They've improved the tooltip for using a bypass when unable to do so. Good. Fix Army's tooltip missing the actual upkeep and only showing its details, and they fixed the overlap in the outline as Army entries. All district backgrounds assets now share the same height, so they should all be very similar looking, which is good. They fixed some inconsistent highlighting in tooltips of the top bar, and large species selection buttons in the species list will now work even when hovering over some other tooltip, triggering UI element inside the button. They've reduced the modifier calculations on ships, fixed some inconsistent highlighting and tooltips of the top bar, which I think I already said. Yeah, that's in there twice. Interesting. And they fixed the previous next planet and moved capital buttons not always updating correctly in the planet view. As I said, those changes are nowhere near as impactful as the ones we're going to get in 4.1, but they're still helpful to have. Good thing that we've got some of these fixes. There are a host of modding and stability changes mostly affecting out of sync stuff, so that's mainly multiplayer things. And the modding, well, if you're a modder, you want to go in and check that out. I'm not going to go through all of these. They're on the screen / have been on the screen at the moment. You can go in and check, as I've said earlier, if you want to read through all of this on the patch notes, which are going to be in the description. A link down below in the description. Don't forget, if you'd like to pick up Europa Universalis 5 and also support this channel, you can do so by using the link down in the description below, or heading over to the Paradox Interactive store and using the code MONTUPLAYS at the checkout. If you enjoyed these patch notes on Stellaris 4.0.22 and it's got you hankering to watch some actual Stellaris gameplay, you might want to watch my most recent roleplay campaign where I took the Commonwealth of Man all the way into the future. A future where the only safe galaxy is a human galaxy. If you'd like to watch that, click the video on screen now.